reflection tolerance had to be accounted for, which is, if you go on to page 9, that is quite a good indication of the conversations that I had with that team around ensuring that the deformations of different panels was limited to what would have been medically acceptable.
Were you involved at all in the quality assurance for the panels, or was that outside of your responsibility?
The quality assurance of the panels was outside my responsibility.
So the selection of the material, the attachment of those panels to your subframe, that was.
I mean, I see your question. You're absolutely right in saying that there is an interface there, and that is what page 9 is possibly not too clearly illustrating. But a series of deflection exercises were there to check whether there was any damage caused to the building because of inappropriate conditions.
Is this what led to your challenge to the designer for his material specification? You said challenged his material specification to deliver a value engineered solution?
Well, that was more to do with the weight, the pure weight of the previous proposal for the panels, which were RC. And the reason for that is because inherently I was working really hard to produce a slender structure which worked, and reduce on it was an obvious avenue to go down to help my structural concept work, but also because from a sustainability and a health and safety point of view, that there are benefits, for example, from a handleability perspective, but also in terms of how much embodied carbon is in this building. It would be inappropriate to load up a building beyond what is reasonable.
Okay, so what value were you extracting then by changing you got them to change the specification from
RC
to RC, and so what was value you extracted then?
Well, there's financial value. Inherently, it costs less to the client. There is a sustainability value. So, of course, you are.
So you had figures for all of those then?
There was a high-level analysis which was done, but it's very difficult to capture the exact value that you'll have from a sustainable perspective, because how can you assess where the aggregates are going to come from? How can you assess what piece of kit will be used to put the panels in place? It's a bit of an exercise.
Would that not be part of a designer's for how you would apply or fit a panel?
Absolutely. So that's what is illustrated on page 13. So the fitting of the panels themselves is something that I discussed with the facade, which was a similar exercise to what is being illustrated on page 13, which is effectively that working on the ground as much as possible and using lifting equipment to lift items in place. Of course, providing appropriate routes to those areas on site, protecting from falling objects, ensuring that operatives who are working on height that minimize the amount of time that an operative spends at height, as well as the fact that any falls, any height of falls are reduced where it is not possible to do so through appropriate railing or PPE, which of course was provided. So the distance wasn't, of course it was reviewed, but it wasn't the way in which we approached the issue.
Okay.
Were these panels manufactured locally, or were they imported?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. I could find out by speaking to previous colleagues, but I don't know off the top of my head.
But you said you were instrumental in the switch to GRC from reinforced concrete.
Yeah.
Would not that affect the possible quality of the product?
Of course, in terms of specifying, as I said, I didn't have the role of designing the panels themselves. Fell with the facade designer, with a facade consultant. There is a requirement to put forward a specification and to propose how that can be done. However, I think that if there was an absolute definition from Arup as a consultancy, then that as to who the manufacturer should be, obviously there could be a proposed manufacturer, but if a limitation for the client, possibly this will incur them additional costs.
Okay. You talk. Turning now to your work at Poplar on that on the land, the using the development and of contaminated land.
Yeah.
You spoke very much in your report about being proactive with the contractor in his proposals. One got the impression that you probably cut across a lot of contractual responsibilities for method of working, the cost of the protective measures, abiding by cost regulations and the like, and one suspects that possibly there may have been some resentment built up on the part of the contractor that you were getting too involved in what was their expertise.
I appreciate that. I think what's important to point out is that Barclays Homes as an organisation are very, very health and safety conscious, and this is not only because it is ethical to be very conscious about health and safety, but also because they have both the principal designer and the client role. So by being in the principal designer role, you are inherently looking at producing the health and safety file. So a lot of the risks which will be encountered in the future, say through working done in an appropriate manner and possibly someone coming across contamination in the future, then that is something which you have an absolute responsibility.
Indeed, but would it not be more appropriate for you to ask for the contractor's proposals and you to review them, rather than one gets the impression